In this module, we'll talk about in more detail running Python programs. In the previous modules, we've talked about files and directory structures and text files, how to create text files, and so on. So all of these are fundamental concepts that we'll use, but now we want to focus in a little bit more detail on actually executing Python programs. And so I open up my command prompt here, and I have a particular file I want to look at called sample mean. And sample mean, as the name suggests, computes the sample mean from a set of numbers. You might notice these are the exact same numbers that we saw in our sample files. So I have this text file called sample mean, and it's stored in my code directory, so I can just do a dir and just do sample mean py, and there's our various codes. So we have sample mean.py, and then I also have sample standard deviation and so on. So in order to execute this program in Python, I have a couple of options. One is I can just type Python and then the name of the script, sample mean.py, and what that instructs Windows to do is execute the Python program, read the instructions inside the text file sample mean, execute those instructions, and then terminate. And so that's exactly what the Python program has done. I can also run this in interpretive mode. So if I just type Python, now we've executed the Python program, but we haven't given it a script to run. And so Python then opens and says, okay, it's waiting for instructions. And so as we saw before, this is when I can enter individual commands like print, hello, and it will interactively interpret and execute the commands. I can also use the import to execute existing files. So I import sample mean, and Python will then read the file, interpret and print the results, but we're staying in the interpreter. So when we executed from the command line, we executed the file, executed the commands, and then we terminated and we return back to the prompt. When we're in interactive mode, we interpret the commands and I stay within the interpreter. Next, I'd like to talk just a little bit about terminology. In particular, this notion of programmed scripts and modules. And so you might have noticed when we talked about Python, sometimes we talk about programs and sometimes we talk about scripts. And so I want to just sort of talk about that terminology a little bit. When we execute Python, so here we are where I left off before. Let me just quit that and say Python sample mean .py, and as I said, what this does is it executes the Python program. The Python program is an interpreter that reads the text file, interprets the expressions, and then performs whatever tasks are specified in the expressions. What we're interested in is this sample mean.py program, or the sample mean.py file. And you can tell, again, from the videos, I sort of interactively use the term scripts and programs. And so this file is a set of expressions that the Python interpreter executes. And so when we talk about programming in Python, in general, what people mean is they're creating these text files. And so these text files are technically in Python termed a module. So we have a standalone text file. In Python terminology, that's called a module. Many times people also call these scripts. So they talk about developing a Python script, where a script is a series of commands. We also interchangeably refer to these as programs, which is not technically correct, but yet it's quite common to do. So it's quite common to talk about sample mean.py as being a Python program, and I myself do that quite often. So again, we have to use these terms or understand the terms from the context, but when we talk about whether we're talking about a script or a program or a module, they generally all refer to the same thing. And when they don't, when we have a particular meaning, again, hopefully that will be clear from the context. So again, the technical term for a file, what this text file like sample mean, or the one we did before hello, these are Python modules. But we often refer to those also as Python programs. When we talk about programming in Python, you are essentially creating these text files that the Python interpreter can operate on. The final thing I'd like to describe or talk about in this module is IDLE, or the Python Integrated Development Environment. And so this is IDLE. It comes with the standard Python installation. And so if you installed Python on your computer, you most likely have this have IDLE in your installation. And so as an integrated development environment, what IDLE does is it lets you edit and execute Python programs interactively. It has some nice debugging options also. So for example, I've opened IDLE here, and I can go to the file, and I'm just going to grab a recent file, the sample mean file that we've worked with. And what IDLE does is it opens in a separate window, or an editor window, that specified file. And so let me see if I can shrink these a little bit. You'll also note that the IDLE IDE has syntax highlighting, so the syntactical components are shown in different colors, and we can edit the file and run the file interactively. So I can execute the file, and over in the shell you can see that it restarted, executed the sample mean. And so sort of a workflow that many people use is, if you're using the IDLE IDE, is you open the file, and then you interactively edit the file and make changes and fix errors and so on, and then you can go and edit and execute the file within this one program. So IDLE is available, as I said, for your as part of the standard install. I typically don't use IDLE. The workflow that I prefer is to use a different editor. As I mentioned before, I use the UltraEdit editor, and I do the same thing that IDLE does, except I do it in conjunction with a command line. So the workflow that I typically use is I have the file open in UltraEdit, and then I just go back and forth between editing the file and then executing the file on the command line. Again, this is a personal choice. If you prefer using the IDLE editor, it's certainly there and available for your use. If you want to use Notepad or WordPad or VI or any other type of editor, all of those things will work equally well. It's just a matter of personal choice and the availability on your computer. What you do need to get used to doing is this notion of editing files and then executing. As we build more and more complex programs, we'll spend a lot of time editing the file, debugging the file, fixing errors, making modifications, and so on. And so you want to be comfortable switching back and forth between editing and then executing the code.